I just finished reading A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. My main reason for kind of reading this was my girlfriend had it lying around her house and I wasn't really doing anything, so I said, sure, I'll read it in the pursuit of trying to read more. I'll admit the synopsis wasn't really appealing to me. Brave New World is kind of this dystopian version of Earth, or I guess it is Earth, but just in many, many years ahead, where currently this story revolves around this premise for conditioning people. More specifically, in this world, they've gotten rid of the need for reproduction, where everybody instead is kind of raised in test tubes and surrogates. Essentially, everyone is born out of a tube. It doesn't just stop there, because once they are actually born, they are then conditioned on how to believe certain things or trained in certain ways. They kind of recognize the need for this hierarchy, this kind of status of different people. They have things like the alpha, the betas, the gammas, and then the epsilons, I believe. And I think within there are a few more variations, but you also see that with each category, they're conditioned in different ways. So like the alphas are raised as winners, whereas the betas, they're raised as, yes, underlings to the alphas, but at least they're not any of the lower two. We kind of don't see too much of the lower conditioning, but it's interesting because they each play their own role in this kind of perfect society. So we kind of follow this one character named Bernard. He's kind of an outcast. He has this weird way of thinking, but also this weird way of, I guess, acting within himself. They kind of have this, or a big theme within this society is that they have this drug called Soma. Soma, I like to think of it as like weed or like some kind of drug without repercussion. I guess the one example that they used was that it's similar to, I guess, alcohol, but it doesn't hurt your head after. Bernard doesn't really like to take these drugs, and that kind of speaks a little bit to his character. Skip ahead a little bit. Bernard is basically going on this trip to visit the savages, people of the past who don't really live in this civilization or anything like that. The story eventually gets there, but then we're introduced to two different characters, John and Linda. Linda is John's mom. We really get to see this difference in thought from John. And so Linda isn't really too important, but she is brought back to the civilization and does play a role in that way. But John essentially becomes this, I guess, celebrity figure. Bernard kind of leeches off that and gets a little power tripped, but he really sees the difference in the ways that how the rest of the society is conditioned. One pivotal moment is when he realizes that Soma is kind of like this poison, or like people just, they're able to pull themselves out of reality by taking this drug and not face, I guess, consequences in the regular way. This eventually escalates to the point where he's like throwing this drug out when it's being given to some of the lower class citizens. And then him, Bernard, as well as one of their other friends, go with him. They meet with the lawmaker of, I guess, England, or like that broader area. He then has a very deep dialogue with John himself. John has kind of been, he's grown up reading Shakespeare, and in this society things of the past are illegal, or it's not even distributed, but because he's a lawmaker, he gets to break whatever laws he wants. So he knows of these texts. You get this kind of dialogue where he explains the sacrifice for truth to have happiness. The way that it's explained is like, you can't find that balance, or that in this perfect society we have chosen happiness over truth. That's why he mentions science. Science within there is not taught to the same extent that it actually would be. It's just this pigeonholed mindset of it, or like this very filtered version that they're willing to teach them. And he got to the choice where he was able to pick truth or happiness, and he decided to pick happiness instead. So John doesn't really agree with this. He kind of gets in like this spiral in a way, but essentially all that happens is that the three of them are sent off to islands in isolation, I guess, or just to be with like different communities with people who think that way. John is an exception. I think the lawmaker kind of sees him as an experiment, so he sent him off. John picked a lighthouse, but yeah, it was very interesting. I won't get too much into like the actual ending of it. That last dialogue that I mentioned was like the second last chapter of the book. Last chapter, I think mainly because I finished it today. It's still fresh off my mind. I don't know how to think about it. But in terms of the book itself, I honestly didn't really like it. That's not to say it's like poorly written or anything. I don't think I've read enough to know whether it's poorly written, but I don't know. The themes were clever in a way, but it just didn't resonate with me. Maybe it was the wording of the book or something, but just not my preference as someone who tries to like nonfiction over fiction. Nonetheless, I still recognize the parallels between different characters, especially when half of the book, or yeah, I would say half of the book kind of follows John and his story, but it kind of touches on this overall message, which was when you're almost faced with this perfect society where no one feels any pain, discomfort, no attachment, like there's no marriage, for example, but you have to give up this pursuit of truth versus the opposite, having things like disease, discomfort, having to experience the highs and lows. So it's very interesting. I believe that Aldous Huxley included this in his foreword just as like a, I wish I kind of included like giving the option to John, but he was just kind of sent away. But nonetheless, this kind of touches up on a philosophical question, or like this thought process, which is like, would you hook yourself up to a dream machine where everything is perfect, you don't have to work, or like a simulation? Would you do that, or would you just forego it and continue living your life? I would say that within the book, I think that kind of both ends of the spectrum are at least touched upon. Some of them are more fleshed out than others, but I think it does challenge the reader in that sense, and that's why I read it as fast as I did. All in all, from a perspective of just trying to do hard things, I'm quite proud of myself. I would have not read this book, but I think in doing so, and I think also doing so in less than 3 weeks, it's not a very long book, but the fact that I don't like reading, and that I don't like reading this book specifically, it kind of symbolizes overcoming something, or persevering something, or keeping my mind open to something. I'm kind of interested to see where my interests will take me next. And yeah, I hope I enjoy the next book. Not to say that I didn't enjoy this one, but yeah, hopefully I enjoy it. Thank you.